Hello, hello. As Nog mentioned, my name is Jen Collins. I'm a learning strategist and senior client director with the Degreed Academies team. And today we want to talk with you about taking a modern approach to your skill building strategy. But before we dive into that, I want to kind of anchor us on what we're here to really dive into. As Dave mentioned earlier today, we have expanded our skill building solutions to support you in your talent development initiatives. At the end of 2022, Degreed finalized the acquisition of LearnIn. And so, as Nag mentioned, I come from the legacy LearnIn team, which is now referred to as Degreed Benefits and Degreed Academies. And what Education Benefits and Academies does is provides an opportunity for you to focus on deep skill building programs for your employees. Now, the term benefits, for some of you that may bring up a couple of thoughts, but don't let the name fool you. When we talk about benefits, this is not about your traditional HR benefits of vacation time, compensation. This is actually a strategic tool for you to leverage in order to support your talent development and skill-based learning initiatives. We are ultimately giving you an opportunity to connect to a broader ecosystem where you can provide opportunities for your employees to dive deep into world-class learning partners and select courses, classes, degree programs that are really the best of those skill-building programs. And what that means is when we dive into that, one of the things when you think about education benefits, I want to know, do you have an education benefit platform today or tool today? Are you leveraging tuition reimbursement? My guess is that you likely do have a program, but it may be old or outdated or underutilized. Or worse, it may not be tied to the strategic business initiatives for your organization. And what we can provide with our Degreed Benefits platform is an opportunity for you to modernize those skills. What do we mean by modernization? First, it's an ability for you to provide a tool that is flexible. You're meeting learners where they're at, where they can then select the courses, classes, resources that are special for their type of learning that they're wanting to take within the budget parameters that are meaningful to them. It provides you the opportunity where you can focus and elevate those types of skill-based programs that are meaningful to the priorities within your organization. The second thing is that it's inclusive. When we think about traditional benefits, when we are requiring people to be reimbursed for their programs that they're taking, that limits the pool of who we can impact. There are many of our employees who cannot afford to pay for a course out of pocket and wait for reimbursement. So when we're creating solutions to leverage a learning stipend instead, we provide learning solutions that are more inclusive for all of our employees. And the final thing is making sure that they're trackable. When we think about tracking, right now, I pretty much guarantee majority of the people in this audience have learning leaders or business leaders within the organization who are approving spends on their corporate card for professional development. Perhaps it's for a conference or a subscription or a book or a deep skill building program. And that's great. We want that to happen. But you know what isn't great is knowing that all of that is happening and you don't have any visibility into it. You don't know how much money is being spent. You don't know where it's being spent. And you don't have an opportunity in which you can guide and kind of drive efficiencies in how to really spend more intentionally with those dollars. And so when we think about tracking, what our benefits platform provides is a means for you as an organization to track where are the dollars being spent, how are they being spent, and really focus those efforts back. And more importantly, this allows you the opportunity to increase retention within your organization and drive engagement. But at the end of the day, I could talk all day about the benefit of benefits, but you really don't want to hear from me. So what I'd like to do is introduce our colleague, partner, and friend, Jamal Smith. He is the People Experience Manager at Checkr, and he is going to join me to talk through this modern approach to skill building. So Jamal?
Let's go! Hi, everyone.
Welcome. Let's have a seat.
Thank you.
All right. So we began our partnership in early 2022.
Yes, indeed.
It's been quite a journey. It feels like where did the time go? And so we'd love to hear a little bit more about Checkr, your role, and what really brought us together.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for having me here and being able to share our story with you all. Very excited. Such a pleasure. A little bit about Checkr. We are a very unique company in the tech space, specializing in background screening. We're still a private company, but we saw a lot of fast growth last year. Some of that growth being due to the acquisition of 2 smaller companies. Enter my role at Checkr. I was a part of one of those companies that were acquired, and quickly coming in, took on the reins of learning and working with Jen and her team, and really being able to see how much success we have had with learning in the past year.
That is great. So when you think about what really led to the situation that needed you to focus on providing a benefit solution?
Yes, so the company, we have a very generous learning benefit, if you will, for all of our full-time employees. You are allotted $3,000 for the year to spend on your upskilling, your professional development. You mentioned it earlier, it was a hassle for some employees to come out of pocket for whatever expense it was, whether it was a $500 conference registration or a couple of books that they needed for a new engineering program. For a lot of people, waiting to be reimbursed for that, it's just not ideal. So we needed something that would remove that barrier for our employees. We needed something that would allow us to track what engagement was happening around learning, and also something that our finance team could really go back and plug the numbers where they needed to be at the end of the year. So we saw learning as a great opportunity for us to really meet all of those needs and remove those challenges for us.
That is amazing. So what are some of the different options that you considered when you dove into things?
So we consider just enterprise-wide subscriptions to some existing providers that we're all familiar with. Being a part of a very lean learning and development team, we knew that meeting the needs for all of our departments and providing those one-off trainings just would not be feasible and almost impossible for a team of about 4 people. So we considered those. Going with learning, it was an obvious decision for us. So here we are now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's what we see often with clients and situations, in that it can be quite limiting when you have to commit to one single provider, because that may be the provider that you're needing at that moment in time. But perhaps if your skill strategy changes or you have a new business need that comes up, how can you be flexible and adaptable?
Absolutely.
So interesting to see that. So when you think about when pre-launch, what were those initial goals that you had to really dive into?
So we had 3 key goals. We knew we needed to increase our engagement around learning. We saw very low engagement prior to launching Learn-In. So that was one of those top goals, increasing engagement and also boosting our learning and development engagement score on all of our internal surveys. Another key goal for us was a very hefty $500,000 spend across the company. For some people, $500,000 is definitely a lot to spend on learning and development, but we wanted to be the best place to work. We wanted our employees to be plugged in. We wanted them to take ownership of their learning and their upskilling. So that $500,000 for us, it was a huge stretch, but we wanted to reach for the stars.
Right, right. That is amazing. I think what's really great to hear that is really tying back to what is the overall goal, and again, not about just what are we going to see in the results of this individual program, but how is it going to support our business overall and really
Definitely,
support our skill
definitely.
strategy. So I'd love to hear from you. What were some of the components that you set up with our degree benefits?
So one of the immediate components we set up was that prepaid virtual card. So yes, every employee has access to that $3,000 learning stipend. All of our new hires, they receive a prorated balance as they are hired throughout the year. But the great thing with this prepaid virtual card, everyone isn't front loaded with $3,000. So yes, we have this huge goal of $500,000 in spending, but we know that not every employee will utilize the full stipend that they are allotted. So setting up those virtual cards was the very first thing that we did. From there, we went to all of our people managers, worked with them to really go through the existing marketplace that Learnin offers, identified about 3 to 5 programs that they thought were necessary for their teams, things that they felt as if the members on their team could quickly plug into that program and begin upskilling immediately, whether it was acquiring a new engineering skill or honing in on some of those communication skills that you might have. Whatever that was, we wanted managers to really have some ownership and just buy-in to the program as a whole. So they needed to be involved from the get-go. And from there, we just went on a road tour throughout the company, met with teams during their all-hands meetings, set up a Q&A page on our internal Confluence space that we have, and just really took the time to educate employees on this new and fantastic platform that we had and that they could easily plug into with ease.
Right. You know, I love what you talked about in the flexibility. So, one of the things, $3,000, while it's a lot of money, that's amazing,
Mhm.
but not something that all organizations can do. And even the flexibility of having a prorated amount. So, an employee who starts mid year in December, how do we make sure that they're given still development opportunities?
Definitely.
And I love also what you mentioned about the stakeholder buy-in. So ultimately, the success of our learning programs is really driven by where do we have buy-in across the organization, top down, over, sideways. And so the targeted approach that you took in having them be a part of curating what are the types of skills that we want to focus on, what are the types of programs we have, probably made it quite successful.
It did, yes. And even to this day, we have managers coming back and, they want to reevaluate the programs that they originally recommended. And we do that. We sit down, let's go through the marketplace again, and let's trade out some of those programs. Some of our leaders, if they are out in the industry doing webinars and attending conferences, if they see a program that they feel will be beneficial for their team and their leaders, it's just a couple of easy steps for me to plug that into the marketplace and then recommend it for that team. So it's an ongoing process.
I love to hear that. So, how did it go? What were the results?
So our results blew us out of the water, I will say. We updated some of our goals mid-year because we saw the great traction we were having. We went from expecting a 25% utilization throughout the company to actually having about 60% of the company requesting a program or a resource. So that was pretty great to see. 91% increase in our learning engagement score. Another great thing, you want your employees to be engaged. Higher engagement more than likely leads to higher retention. So that was great for us to see as well. We saw a 200% increase in unique participants using that learning benefit. So if you saw a couple of slides back, we had about 2.5% of our learning budget utilized in 2021. So to go from having 2.5% of that budget being utilized to seeing that huge increase in how many employees are really taking the time to seek out learning opportunities, whether it was attending a conference, purchasing a book. We have a couple of book recommendations that tie back to our core values and our leadership principles as a company. So we saw a lot of spending on Amazon
Yeah.
last year for those books. But really seeing the unique requests coming through, it wasn't just degree programs and webinars. We really saw some unique learning going on.
Right. That is so great. And I think that, you talked about the tracking of the spend, having the availability to confirm that the money that's been approved is being spent in the way it's intended
Absolutely.
is really key too, because there are going to be a couple people who may use that system and try to find some loopholes, and we run a tight ship here. So,
And I would also add to our people managers, that early buy-in they had with recommending those courses, they're still plugged in. They're approving the requests that the employees are submitting. So the managers they're plugged in, and they have the team insights to really see what type of learning is going on before I begin to share those reports with them.
right, right. And that's so important when we think about, so the employee is requesting spend to buy a course or a class or a book. Manager approves it. And then at that point in time, the employee then takes that or makes that purchase. And then at that point, that's where that communication loop continues, where the managers provide an opportunity to say in a one-on-one, how are things going? How did that course go? How are you going to apply this back on
Absolutely.
the job?
Yep.
That's great. So when we dive into the specifics of those results, we'd love to kind of drill down into some of the nitty gritty.
Yes, let's get to it. So here you only see three of those top results. But yeah, let's dive deeper. Our engagement, the 60% of our employees requesting a program or a resource, that's just one request per employee. It could be a request for $5. It could be a request for $2,500. Whatever it is, it was captured. And that's where we got that 60%. This was actually a really great stat for me to see at the end of the year. 99% of our employees logged in to LearnIn. Whether or not they requested anything, 99% of our employees actually went on to the platform, checked it out, perused the marketplace, and whether or not they found a program that was best suited for them, we know that they're more than likely going to come back and submit that request if they did not last year. So that was also great for us to see. With usage, those unique participants across the board, over 2,000 unique requests for programs and resources. Again, conferences, books, degree programs, one-off upskilling programs through some of the great providers that LearnIn offers. We really, really loved seeing that 2,000 plus and unique requests. And then with tracking, we were really able to see what teams were more engaged with the platform, what skills were those teams requesting, what managers had the most use across the board. That's something that we didn't necessarily highlight here, but I think it's important to go back and applaud those people managers, for allowing their teams room to grow, whether it was a team member who wanted to move cross-functionally, those managers are having those conversations with them and helping them with those resources and those programs to get them where they want to be. The average spend per program, again, $3,000 is a lot of money to give all of your employees, especially if you are a company with 1,200 plus employees. The average request was only about $973 or so. So again, we're not seeing an entire spend of $3,000, but still, people are spending money and spending it intentionally on their learning. And going back to that tracking, we knew that our top skills that were requested last year, top three, software engineering, communication, and project management. So what we could do this year as a company is take those top three skills and start building some internal programs and some internal resources to continue to connect folks to those skills that they are learning versus having everyone go out and use their learning stipend for those three skills.
Right, right. And maybe even leverage the Academy's platform
Absolutely.
to do that and bring it to life.
That's in the plan.
Yeah. So one thing I'd love to double click on that you mentioned is the engagement of 99% have accessed the platform, only 60% leverage their learning budget. I recall at the end of December, we deployed a use it or lose it campaign. Because, you're told you get a bunch of money and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to do that like tomorrow. tomorrow. And then we sent communication to say, hey, use it or lose it. This does not roll over to next year. And by golly, our teams were rolling through. That week between Christmas and New Year's
Yes.
was a flood of spending.
I was a little adamant with that communication that went out, but yes, use it or lose it. We don't roll over that stipend. Everyone started back at 3,000 after the new year. So I guess that use it or lose it really sent people into a frenzy on the
Yeah.
platform.
And it's great. I think it's really going to be exciting as we dive into our Q1 numbers for this year, is what percentage of those users who accessed the platform but didn't use their stipend did they get to it? Because they realized, oh my goodness, such a missed opportunity. I could have done this, but didn't have the time, what have you. And so it'll be interesting to see how those numbers continue to
Oh, yeah.
increase as we go forward. So as we dive into things, I'd love to hear what were some of the kind of key pieces that were surprising metrics for you, or really things that made you proud as you were diving into the program?
One thing that was surprising of the great traction we saw at the end of December. You know, we had those road shows and we sent out communications. We had some refreshers throughout the year, but still knowing that everyone learns on their own schedule. And you can't force everyone to spend that stipend by the end of Q3. It's not going to happen. So the uptick in users on the platform in December was a huge surprise, a great surprise, but definitely a big surprise for me. And I think December is what really launched us over the edge with our goals.
Yeah, that's amazing. What were some of the things when you think about the spend of where you started before, of what, 3.7% usage when it was reimbursement, and then now to the learning stipend? So tell us a little bit about what you really uncovered through that.
Yeah, so through that, uncovering how many of our employees were truly engaged in some sort of learning and upskilling, taking that ownership of their learning and development, that traditional method of hosting lunch and learns and requiring employees to log on or sign up and attend a session hosted by the HR team, those days are long gone. Again, people learn on their own schedule, and so many of us are remote now. We could be working on a document and have a webinar plan on the other side at the same time, and we're still learning. So seeing the number of employees, and in fact, we octupled our engagement.
It's amazing.
Like octupled. Who
I didn't
says
even,
that?
yeah, I didn't even know that was a word. Yeah.
But that was very surprising, and I think our leaders. I know our leaders were blown away when they saw that number.
That is so great. That's so great. So when you were diving into the types of other stats, what were some of the things that really struck you, and specifically where they were spending their money and on what?
Yes, again, knowing that people were spending their money on books, I just approved a request for a book today because it was a book that our CEO recommended around high-performing teams. As a company, we still want to be the best place to work, but we're moving towards a high-performing culture. So with that, we're quickly upskilling people and we're making sure people are in the right seats to really drive business results. So a lot of those recommendations come left and right from our CEO. So seeing that people were purchasing books, whether it was from an online shop or if they were going to their local Barnes and Noble, or not actually local, but online, that was very surprising. And we're seeing people request books for their degree programs, again, books that are recommended by our CEO. And his recommendations led us to creating a running list of recommendations based on leadership, company growth, being a high-performing team. And our product and engineering teams, they also have a running list of book recommendations. That 56%, most of it came from our R&D teams. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what's so interesting, and this is where we talk about tracking and data, of if right now our learning teams are spending, or excuse me, our business teams are spending money on their personal corporate cards and just approving things as, I come and I say, hey, Jamal, can I go to this class or can I buy this book? And you say, yeah, great. But having the visibility and knowing where are they spending the money, on what and what types of resources is really important. And more than anything, it's really opened up. I think what was most enlightening is the mix here, and that we can't provide a one-size-fits-all solution. And each organization, based on their culture of what they like to do, kind of what is kind of the trend of, do we want to even have book clubs and talk about what this means and how we're going to apply this back on the job. It provides that flexibility in the platform for you to make those selections, but also serve up. So as we go into 2023, you can make recommendations and highlight those within the platform to say, hey, here's top recommended tool, resources, and programs for you.
Yes, and I'm glad you said book clubs. Our employee resource groups are actually, they're latching on to that concept of book clubs. And I think that's another way to really engage employees outside of their typical day-to-day responsibilities, but still offering ways to upskill and engage around other topics that make you holistically a better person in order to be a better employee.
Right. And it reinforces what we know works in learning, which is peer-to-peer learning and really addressing the what's in it for me. It's great that I've read this book, but how does this apply to me? How am I going to leverage this? What makes sense and how I need to deliver and show up on the job? And then ultimately, then your visibility of how that ties back into the business goals overall. So when we dove into, we talked about the resources, the types of programs. One of the other things that we can track is the ability to look at where are they spending the money? What are those top providers? And I think as we dove into that, you had thousands, over 2,000 different programs, resources that were selected. And of those, we were kind of able to pull out some of the top providers and top transactions. And it was really interesting to dive into these, particularly because the top three here are those that are monthly subscriptions and programs. When you looked into this data, what did this really tell you, and how did you use this for your organization?
Great question. So looking into these three top providers, and I would say they're the go-tos for a lot of employees because they offer such a great catalog of programs, no matter what part of a company you sit in. We saw that employees that were going and seeking these subscription-based providers, again, they're being very intentional with the programs that they are requesting. Some programs extend about 3 months, so we know that those employees, they're using that month-to-month subscription and maybe having access to other programs through demos or through coupon codes that these providers might be providing. But knowing that they are subscribing, we went back and we saw that we actually saved about $80,000 in learning through these subscription-based providers. $80,000 is a lot of money to a finance team.
Yes.
So knowing that we were putting money back into the pocket of the company was also something fascinating to see with these three providers.
Right, and that's an important thing. A lot of our learning is funded with subscriptions of like, okay, you just set it, forget it. Well, that's great for crockpots, but not great for our money when we're spending it for learning programs. And so having an opportunity for us to see and to trigger that, to say, is it actually, are you ready to commit to this for next month? No? Okay, well, you can come back and request it when you are ready, but we're not going to keep paying this bill.
Right.
So what were some of the results when you think, we talked kind of anecdotally about some of the specific metrics, but one of the things we've discussed throughout each of these presentations today is the focus on business impact. How does this tie to our business goals? So what was kind of the key thing that you saw and how it impacted your business overall?
Going back to the overall business impact, I would say that we know that we have these very hefty company goals. One of those goals, it always sits with the people team and making sure people are upskilled and making sure people understand their compensation, and we have manager and enablement pillars of those goals. We know that we have those, but knowing that we can go back and tie every single one of those pillars back to learning through Learn-In, that was my biggest takeaway for the year for sure.
That's amazing. And so when you thought about how it impacted retention, what were some of the things that you saw through that?
So with retention, we went back and we ran some numbers, and we can say that people who use Learn-In, they were 4.5 times more likely to stay at the company versus those who voluntarily resigned from their roles. Again, engagement leads to better retention scores across the board. So those people who are really plugged in, again, going back to that 99% of employees who logged on to the platform, that's all they have to do was log on. Because as soon as they log on and they click on Marketplace, they see a list of recommended programs. It's already embedded there. If they go to it, they're likely going to stay with us.
Yeah, and see that you're investing in them. You're investing in their personal development. You're prioritizing for them where are the things and how, what type of skills are best for them to focus on in their role
Yep.
and in their department as well. You know, I think that's really important when we talk about trackable and having the opportunity to have the quantitative data that's going to give us a means in which we can start to attribute how is our spending and learning tying back to our overall business and how does it impact our business?
Definitely.
And piecing that all together is really good and really seeing that value and proving the value of that when we're investing in our learners, that it is tying back and it's reducing that turnover overall.
And another thing, you could even tie it back to your performance ratings. You know, you have your high performance, but what about everyone else? What about some of those folks who might be at risk, you know, to leave the company? How do we catch them before they finally make the decision to leave? Is it a program that we could plug them into? What questions are we not asking those employees that we can more than likely uncover through our learning programs?
That's right. That's right. So I think when we dive into this, kind of tying it up here to the next, if you can click, mine's not working. If we can go to the next slide, thank you. Really, when we think about you mentioned those learners who investing in their own spending. That's really tying back to the inclusive piece of things. As we talk about being more flexible, inclusive, and trackable with our learning programs, are there any other anecdotal or kind of pieces of advice that you have for companies that may be listening and interested
Yeah.
in this that you'd like to share with us?
The flexibility is there, you know. There are so many programs out there for employees to just see what fits their needs and their career growth aspirations. If it's not in the Learn-In marketplace, we can get it added to the Learn-In marketplace. So it is not one size fits all when it comes to our learning and our learning benefit as a whole. Going to that inclusive piece, one thing that we were very intentional about in the last couple of months was making sure that our employees in Canada had the same dollar amount as our employees in the US. So we took away the Canadian dollars. Everyone has 3,000 US dollars across the board. So the inclusion piece is there also. And then going back to removing those barriers for employees to not have to come out of pocket and pay for learning. Everyone has the same opportunity to take ownership of their learning, regardless of what their paycheck looks like at the end of the week.
Right, right. I think that's so important. And, in providing that, visibility at the manager level where they're knowing what is my team spending on, how are they spending on it, can create those intentional conversations on how are you developing, and then ultimately tying it back to additional deep skill building programs. I think that's wonderful. So I really appreciate you spending time with us today to really dive into sharing the Checkr story. It has been an amazing partnership for the last year, and we really appreciate your time in bringing it to life. As we kind of close the conversation today, when we think about degreed benefits and how this can fit into your overall ecosystem, again, it's really about taking that modernized approach and looking at your deep skill building initiatives through this targeted, strategic way? And how are we being more flexible, where you're providing any program that's really right-sized for the skills that you need to focus on within your organization? Making sure that we're providing inclusive opportunities for all of our learners to invest in their development while reducing the burden of the reimbursement structure there. And more importantly, providing that trackability. So the ability for managers and admins to see who and approve spending, as well as giving you visibility into how are the dollars being spent across your organization and where there may be some gaps as it relates to what skills you need for the future. And so, Jamal, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate everything that you've done in sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for sticking it with us and making sure that we continue to build upon the foundation that we set last year. I hope that at this time next year we can share all the success that we've had with the platform this year.
Yeah.
There's so much in store.
Yeah, well, and I think that's the other great thing is you've been such an amazing partner in providing some additional product feedback on how we can continue to improve. And so excited to see where that continues to go as we continue to move forward as partners.
Absolutely.